to me, if you're gonna include Pascal Siakam in this trade, why are you making the trade? I mean,
Yeah.
Pascal Siakam is at least on the same level, I think, as Damian Lillard as far as a player, especially when you consider how good he is as a defender. So you give him up. I mean, the whole point would be to add Damian Lillard to Pascal Siakam.
Yeah, I included it for completion's sake, but I don't see any viable way that trade makes any sense for the Raptors.
Right. Now, the one trade that has been kind of thrown out there is that maybe OG Anunoby. And again, OG Anunoby is on an expiring deal, just like Pascal Siakam. OG Anunoby would be on an expiring deal, so you could see like, okay, this might work for Portland because that's a guy that they could maybe flip and get more assets for. It doesn't make that much sense to me because once again, if you're the Raptors, I would want to add Lillard to OG Anunoby and Pascal Siakam because that's your path to contention. The whole point of getting Damian Lillard would be to try to take one good swing at this, right?
So I'll preface this by saying I think the most likely trade, would it happen, would be one centered on OG Anunoby. And we're going to talk about the other option after this. But I think that's most likely, just because we can say his name. Scotty Barnes objectively has more value as somebody who's just gone into the third year of his rookie contract. He has, tantalizing upside, even if he hasn't reached it. But I think a trade built around Anunoby, them unlocking the 2024 pick, or I should say unprotecting the 2024 pick they owe to San Antonio, which is currently protected 1 through 6, which would allow them to trade 26, 28, and 30 to Portland if they wanted to do that, plus adding, let's say, Precious Achua, Chris Boucher, and, salary filler, Thaddeus Young, and then having Portland move Anunoby. Presumably they don't want him in addition to Jeremy Grant, and get a younger player or a player who more obviously fits, the obvious name there being DeAndre Ayton. Like, that makes some sense for all parties involved. And you can't extend Anunoby. That's one of the things here, and that's one of the reasons the Raptors have to consider this path. You could probably extend Siakam. He's said he's open to an extension. The most you can offer OG Anunoby right now, based on his contract, is it's sort of like the Jaylen Brown conversation before he made All-NBA. You can only offer him a 4-year, a 4-year, $117 million contract. I think
That's all?
the number. And we saw with the Jeremy Grant contract, like, I like Jeremy Grant. OG Anunoby is a better defensive player than Jeremy Grant. He's probably not quite the offensive player that Jeremy Grant is, but he's also younger and certainly thinks he can. He's heading for at least that contract, if not more, per year, I would say. So you could see why Portland would be hesitant to hold on to him. But also, the Raptors have to think about a world in which Anunoby and Siakam and Gary Trent are all free agents, and that's not a world they want to be in either. So that is the level. That's what a big part of what causes the urgency to go one way or the other. And I think Anunoby is the most likely route there. Saying that, I have questions about how the version of the team that moves Anunoby would look in the short term. And like you said, and by short term, I mean, let's say 2 years, okay?
Right.
So 2 years. How does that team look compared to, say, Siakam and Damian Lillard make total sense together? Jakob Poeltl, like, maybe you'd rather somebody with more shooting, but like, he's a very good defender at center, makes sense. And then OG Anunoby, he spaces the floor a little bit, doesn't need the ball as much, and just isn't a guy who needs to be a screening partner or have the ball. Like, that is like as good of a defensive core to protect Damian Lillard, I think, as you could ask, as you could reasonably ask for. And I think that is the Raptors' best path to winning now in a Lillard trade.
The only issue with that, with OG Anunoby going to Portland, they already have a guy that they need to flip in Jeremy Grant, right? Like that's going to be the next stage of this teardown that they're going to go through is to,
well, they got to wait a few months.
Right, exactly. Because they did just sign him in the offseason to this huge contract. So I don't know that they would necessarily be interested in OG Anunoby unless you could rope in a third team, which of course we've heard reports that they would rope in Phoenix to get Ayton to Portland and maybe Nurkic to Phoenix, which if you're Phoenix, I don't know what the thinking is there. Ayton is a pretty good player, and Nurkic is not the defender he used to be. So I don't know what their thought is there.